The nation watched Derek Chauvin torture George Floyd. Debbie Hines brings us his update live from the trial.
On the line with us is Debbie Hines, trial lawyer, legal political commentator, former prosecutor, former assistant attorney general for the state of Maryland. I am Debbie Hines, DebbieHines.com is her website, and I am Debbie Hines is also her Twitter handle. Hey, Debbie, what happened today in the Chauvin trial that we need to know about?
So here we're now getting down to the nuts and bolts of everything. We are no longer really having fact witnesses, but we're having what we as lawyers know as expert witnesses. So Jody, I have to look at his name, Steiger testified, and he testifies as an expert on unreasonable force or what is acceptable force. And, some people may be confused and thinking, well, didn't we have all of these other police officers from the Minneapolis Police Department testify about that? But this individual, he is really considered an expert. He's from the L.A. Police Department formerly. And what he says is when he's looking at everything that all the rest of us have seen with Mr. Floyd prone on the ground, handcuffed behind his back, knee on his neck by Derek Chauvin, that was extremely unreasonable use of force, that there was no crowd interference, because, of course, that's what the defense has brought up. What about the crowd? Did that in any way affect the officer's judgment? He says no, because this crowd was a friendly crowd. They were trying to get help from Mr. Floyd. They were not trying to harm Mr. Floyd. And he did talk about the earlier incident when the police are getting ready to put Mr. Floyd in the police vehicle. And he said at that point, yes, George Floyd is resisting arrest, and that they did have the right at that point to use the taser. But going back to the incident that is the basis of this court, he did not have the instance. Now, on defense, it was cross-examination was kind of interesting because the defense brought up some part in the video that the defense claims he heard, meaning the defense attorney heard Mr. Floyd say he ate too many drugs, and Officer Steiger said no, he didn't hear anything of that sort. So those are just things that the defense is just trying to throw out bits and pieces to unravel at least one juror on their side.
Yeah, I totally get it. One of the things that, I was only able this morning to dip into little bits and pieces of the trial because we were doing show prep. But the one thing that I heard that really pinged me is that the handcuffs that police officers use, when you struggle, they get tighter. It's called ratcheting. And so if this is true, then those handcuffs would have been biting into George Floyd's wrist more and more tightly. It is not pleasant. It can be very painful to be handcuffed. Would it be reasonable to argue that George Floyd was being tortured before he was murdered, or as he was being murdered?
Well, I think that's what we all saw, is a man being tortured. But what is the legal standard is whether or not the police used unreasonable or excessive force. And in this case, yes, the handcuffs would be a part of that, but the handcuffs are not a part of what they have to prove, because they have to prove, remember, the other part is causation, that what Derek Chauvin did caused Mr. Floyd's death. So the handcuffs are really kind of legally like a non-issue. And maybe an emotional issue, but that's a non-issue because tightening of handcuffs would not have caused his death. And if that's all it was, it would have still been unreasonable force, but we would not be having a murder trial.
Right. But apparently they can configure the handcuffs, I guess it's called double locked, so that they won't automatically tighten when the person struggles. And they did not do that in this case. Do you know if doing that or not doing that, I realize it's not specific to the outcome of the trial, but I'm just horrified by this. Is doing that or not doing that any kind of standard police practice?
That I don't know, because most of the cases that, get to a level of liability, they're on excessive police force, and they would rise to a much higher level. I mean, unless the person's arm was some way injured or broken, or there was some injury there to the arm or the wrist, so to speak, there wouldn't be any reason for showing that it was unreasonable or excessive force. Well, it could be an unreasonable or excessive force, but it's kind of like, I hate to say it, no harm, no foul, so to speak.
Right. No, I totally get it. And cops routinely put people in handcuffs, and to a large extent that's necessary sadly, in our society. I'm curious, your personal opinion, Debbie Hines. Do you think that there is going to be, that this trial is going to help or hurt the move to reform policing in the United States?
Oh, it's definitely going to help the move. I mean, because regardless of what happens, we know that this is not over. Even if there is a murder conviction, we know that this is not over. And it just speaks volumes for all the other individuals, victims of police violence for which there was never a conviction. So I don't think it matters which way it comes out. I mean, I think the movement that was started around the world by everyone looking at George Floyd, that movement is not going to go away whether or not a verdict of guilt is rendered against Derek Chauvin or a verdict of not guilty or a mistrial. I think the movement is here to stay, and very well it should be.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think we cannot discount the importance of performance, of performing on media, of educating the public through I don't want to call this entertainment because it's very serious stuff, but through seeing shocking processes. In this case, the trial and this guy defending himself, saying, "Oh yeah, well, I could do that. That was fine." I think it's going to really. I hope and pray that it's really going to help the movement to reform policing in this country and around the world.
I think it will. Yeah.
Debbie, great talking with you again. Thanks so much for dropping by. Debbie Hines.
Here, Thom.